Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello to anyone who's listening to this on the Temple Beth Am podcast series. Recently, the things I've been putting from Zoom onto Facebook have started, and then a minute later they stop. I hope that doesn't happen this time. I don't know what the problem is. It's great to be back with you studying. I'm acutely aware that 3 weeks ago at this very time, I was just completely, we actually had a technical Zoom thing we had to work out because the funeral for my mother, which was on this Zoom channel, was ending right before this class was to begin. So there's a poignant connection between being back and studying with you and looking as fuzzy as I do as I come to 3 weeks since my mother's funeral. And I've obviously missed studying with you, and it's great to be back. And check the WhatsApp chat for the upcoming schedule. We will meet next week, and then not the following two, at least with me, because I will be on the shul trip to Africa. But I believe that Leonard is teaching both classes. I'll update that in the WhatsApp chat. Welcome back. Hello. Okay. I have us as being midway through the Rashis on verse 42 of chapter 12. But let's get back into the verses a bit because it's been a while since we were there. So to remind you, we're at the end of a very long chapter. It might be by verse one of the longest chapters in the book of Shemot, if not the longest chapters. And we're sort of going back and forth in this chapter between what's happening in real time and instructions for the future, right? And if you go back to, let's go again. If you go back to verse 40 in chapter 12, it sums up the number of years that they were in slavery. We did some math. We skipped some of the Rashi. Verse 41, it kind of repeats that at the end of 430 years, in the middle of that night, they left. So it seems that by the end of chapter 41, we're basically, narratively speaking, out of Egypt, because it's a past tense, Yatzu kol tzivot Adonai. Verse 42, which is the one we're on, starts to connect one more time the happenings of that night with Jewish experience in perpetuity. And we have this interesting phrase, Leil Shimurim Hu Ladonai. It is the night of preservations. Shimur is the gerund of the verb lishamer, which is the root shamar in piel. In modern Hebrew, lishamer means to preserve. It's an intensive version of to guard, right? What it meant there, what English word to put to that Hebrew word is very hard to know. But and whatever it is plural, it's a night of preservings or preservations or intense guardings. But then ladunai, we don't know what to do with a preposition of God, for God, to God. Is God the one doing the preserving? Is the preserving happening in God's name? Here, the multiple possibilities of what a biblical preposition mean leave us questioning things. And then lahotziam me'eretz Mitzrayim, we don't know what the connection is between the previous phrase and the next phrase, but something like in order to, or that he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And then hu halayla hazeh, this is the night, ladonai, for God, shimurim, the same word, preservings, lachol b'nei Yisrael adorotam, for all the children of Israel forever. Vigil. Yeah. I mean, we could put 15 words in there. What we have is in two halves of the verse, one of the shimurims is connected God, shimurim hu ladonai, and the other preservation is shimurim chol b'nei Yisrael. So it seems to be whatever the word means. One of it is something that God is doing or experiencing, and one of it is what we are doing or experiencing. Before we go back into the Rashi, we'll just compare a little bit of translations. We did that last time, but it's been a while. In order to make sense of the Rashi, you need to have some possible meanings of the verse in front of you. So let me share Everett Fox, and then Larry, you can share a couple that you've got as well. Okay, I'm going to put this on the screen. Okay, so here's Everett Fox trying really hard to put this into good English and be honorable to the Hebrew. It is a night of keeping watch, right? Leil Shimurim. He doesn't maintain the plural of Shimurim. I don't fault him for that. This is a hard thing to translate, but he turns the Shimurim into a hyphenated English, a keeping watch. He adds his note, keeping watch, reflecting the play on words in the Hebrew shamor by including ideas of both guarding and observing. Kasuto, which we can look at, sees shamor as a shepherd's term, appropriate here. Note again in the tense structure the conflation of narrative and contemporary ritual, which I discussed, that this is both talking about what's happening in real time. You're already wearing your Africa hat. We're not leaving for 11 days. Your pith hat.
It's in Los Angeles.
But not in Whiteman. Sorry. And it's also talking about things happening going forward. And then he says, for God. Everett Fox always renders Yud He Vav He as YHWH. It's a night of keeping watch for God. Even in the English, what the word for means is hard to understand. To bring them out of the land of Egypt. I think what he means in the translation is that on the one hand, God was doing some watch keeping that night by keeping us out. And then, semicolon, this is the night for God, a keeping watch of all the children of Israel throughout the generations. The way he translates it, he's changing what the preposition lamed means in each half of the verse, because he's saying both of these keeping watches are God's doing. It was a keeping watch night for God that night when he brought us out. And in what way is it Leil Shimurim for us going forward? On that night, God is still protecting us. Like as if to say that if we do the rituals properly, we are still experiencing the Shimurim of God. That's a choice. He doesn't have to translate that way. I have no idea if he's right or wrong. This is a hard verse to translate into modern English. Okay, Larry, do you have a good English, an interesting one?
I do. I have a comment. Should I save it for later?
It's up to you. You got the microphone.
Okay, I'll read the translations first. So the first one is altar. It is a night of watch for the Lord, for his taking them out of the land of Egypt. This night is the Lord's, a watch for all the Israelites through their generations.
What do you think he means by the second phrase, a watch for all the Israelites? Who's doing the watching? Are we being watched or are we watching? What do you think his English means?
The watching is for the Israelites.
So you think he's agreeing with Everett Fox that both of these watchings are of God to us?
Right,
Okay.
which I disagree with, but Aryeh Kaplan, I
would
think.
alter know that you do.
Well, wait. Aryeh Kaplan, I think, agrees with me. There was a night of vigil for God, preparing to bring them out of Egypt, period. This night remains for the Israelites a vigil to God for all generations. That's the flip.
Yeah.
So my only comment is, even though it's Shimurim and not Shmirah, so for people on a Chevra Kedisha, there are those who believe that what the concept of crossing over. I don't want to go into that, but some people believe that's the soul, the neshama is crossing over. The Shmirah and then the Tahara are assisting in that action. So for me, the crossing over was the Israelites, right? So that's God is doing the Shmirah for that crossing over. And now we are doing the Shmirah now. Well, now how do you interpret what is God crossing over? We're trying to bring God into our world to bring back that direct connection.
That's lovely. If Aryeh Kaplan and if the scholars Aryeh Kaplan and Larry Herman are correct, it does add an interesting layer to what we think we're doing on Pesach, because the standard explanation of Pesach is that we are reenacting, but this interpretation is we're actually repaying. That God took us out, and as it were, on Pesach night, we are taking God out of what? Obscurity, irrelevance, right? We are removing God from not mattering to mattering by continuing to do this ritual, and we are doing Shmirah for God that night. Is that what the verse means? I don't know, but it's a really interesting way of thinking about our rituals on Pesach, right? Norm and then Barry. Let's give Norm the microphone. Norm, hold on. Take the microphone over there. Take it off it's easier off the stand.
I like that interpretation, but I think there's another possibility here. The text may be hinting that just as we celebrate Pesach every year as a commemoration, whether it's a reenactment or a paying back or what, that so also God is celebrating Pesach every year.
Nice.
Because it is, in a sense, an anniversary of the time that he really made us his people.
Very nice.
And
Anniversary.
He's celebrating just as we celebrate.
Norm, I always love the way you pronounce the word Pesach. It's very, very old world in Yiddishy. Did anyone else pronounce it that way? Pesach?
Almost everyone.
Not Pesach. Pesach. With a shva almost under the samach. Pesach.
I admit I am Ashkenazi.
I always thought you were from Algeria. Barry.
So I'm looking at the Mechilta. Actually, I'm looking on Gemini Mechilta on this, and it suggests that it's a metaphysical portal, an annual portal in which we are connecting. God is connecting with us, and it's our responsibility to connect with God by doing this shmira at the Seder, to stay awake and focus on this connection through this portal.
Yeah. It's hard to stay awake in those moments, but the stakes are high, as it were. Please, Diane.
So in critical theory reading of this, is this like an insertion, this piece of vigil for all the children of Israel throughout the ages? Is this some anachronistic piece that got stuck in, do we think?
Maybe, right? That's not my field or area expertise, right? You can be sure that there is a Talmudic and medieval attempt to synthesize it and say, no, this is just predicting. But if you wanted to see stitchings in a chapter, you could see them here. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the verse itself? All right. We got through the first Rashi on that verse. I have us in the second Rashi, Hu halayla hazel Adonai. Okay. So let's just do that. Matt, you want to read Hu halayla hazel Adonai? You take a microphone, please.
It's coming through very muffled. Can't hear him.
Pause, Matt. Rick, was that better, or is it just a bad mic?
It's not good. It was in the bottom of a barrel.
Okay. Matt, why are you at the bottom of a barrel? Let's just try this mic. So far, Rick, all he did was read the Hebrew.
Hu halayla hazel Adonai. Is that good?
Much better.
Hu halayla she'amar la'Avraham b'layla hazeh ani goel et banecha.
Okay, first translate, and then we'll figure out what he's saying. And like many Rashis, I want you to try to conjure his question. He's only giving the answer.
This is the night when he said to Abraham, on this night, I will redeem your children.
Okay, so I have three questions for Matt and all of you. One, what's Rashi's question? What's sort of the problem with this answer? And another question that I've forgotten. Matt or anyone else?
The question is, what was the question that you were
What's annoying Rashi in the verse such that this is his answer? And then we'll get to the answer. Or do you want to start with the answer first? Remember, the things that can annoy Rashi are redundancies, omissions.
Mm-hmm.
Barry has an idea. We have to pass that mic down because
Well, Raji's asking, we're back in the Abraham story. Did God say this night? Where did that come from?
right. I think you're close, Barry. Right. We've got the word Leil early on the verse, right? So if God speaks precisely and does not waste a word, what is the significance of the returning to the noun, hu halayla hazeh, and the hu halayla hazeh seems to be begging for an antecedent. Yeah, it's that night that we spoke of. That seems like how it reads. And Rashi's like, well, when did we speak about that? And so his answer is what? God's promise to Abraham when?
That night.
What night? Right. So give it back to Matt. I'm sorry we only have one microphone to pass around.
I'm not certain, but I think it's the night where they had the splitting of the sacrifices, and he had to walk up and down in between the dead birds or something.
Exactly right. End of Parshat Lech Lecha, Brit Bein Habitarim, the covenant of the parts, the first place where God tells the whole scope of what's going to happen, that you're going to go down to Egypt and you're going to be a subject of a foreign nation. I will redeem you. That happens at night, or at least a night for Avraham. Remember, like God brings down darkness and a tardema falls over him, evocative of the tardema that falls down over Adam when Eve is created, right? But the problem with Rashi's answer is that nowhere in that chapter is there a reference to the night on which anything's going to happen. So Rashi is quoting or paraphrasing a Mechilta, which is kind of reading into that chapter. If we wanted to spend an hour reading that chapter again, we could, as if to say, when God promises the redemption of Avram's descendants, that in that night, God implies that there's going to be a night in the future where it's going to happen. And Rashi says, that's the night of Hu Halayla Hazeh. The weakness is that God never mentioned. It would be great if you opened up chapter, I guess, 15 or 16 of Lech, what is it? 15, and there was a reference to Halayla. That would be really elegant, but there isn't. So the Mechilta is kind of squeezing it out of Bren HaBetarim to make this Hu Halayla Hazeh not redundant or less redundant. Larry, microphone. Who has the mic? There's only one that's working. I'm not giving up mine.
I had a revelation you probably all already thought about, and that is the Manishtana.
Halayla Hazeh.
Halayla Hazeh.
Nice.
And then I said, well, wait a second. I wonder how many times we have Halayla Hazeh. 3 times in the Torah. I haven't checked.
Laila Hazeh or Laila Hu?
Halayla Hazeh. And I didn't check who Halayla Hazeh, but Halayla Hazeh, and all 3 are in this chapter. So in verse 8 and verse 12. And I don't know whether we noted it or whether there's anything significant because I haven't gone to them. So, but we've got 3 references to Halayla Hazeh.
In this chapter, and it's the only time it appears in the Torah?
According to my search, Safaria, real quickly, it's the only time it appears in the Torah. It says it appears elsewhere in the Tanakh, but in checking it doesn't. That happens sometime. And the only other thing I would say is I'm waiting for Rick to chime in here, because Rick is always talking about the word zeh, not hazeh, but zeh, and the trope on zeh. Here it's simply a pashta. Yeah.
Before we hear from Rick, if you want to say something, Larry, what a marvelous thing you just revealed. I've never thought of that. I've read and lain and studied this chapter dozens of times. I've obviously sang the Manashana dozens of times. I've never made the connection, and how wonderful to reveal that. And now that you revealed it, I can't not see it, and it can't possibly be accidental. There's no way that the language of Halayla Hazeh is Mishnaic, right? Our version of the Fir Kashas is a little bit different than what appears in the Mishnah Tosefta, but it's Mishnaic, and I'm now certain that whoever wrote that was immersing himself in this chapter. That's lovely. Thank you for that. Rick, you've been called out. Do you want to say anything or no? You don't have to.
I got to. I looked at the 3. It's 3 different trope. It would have been nice if it was the same trope 3 times for teaching purposes, repetition and all that. But yeah, it's a great pickup. I think obviously whoever wrote Manish Sana was going off this Halayla Hazeh. That's great stuff. I could point out Shimarim has a Tavir under it, so it really emphasizes that word but it doesn't link up to anything else. But I'll keep thinking about it.
Thanks, Rick. Barry and then Rachel.
On the plural of Shimarim, Mechilta makes a point that it's not only they're watching this night, but all future redemptions in the future.
Mm.
And also
The night of multiple preservings every time we do this ritual.
that there can be future redemptions and also future redemptions for the world. So it has redemption at different levels.
Yes, and Rashi's going to say something similar to that in a second. Rachel, and then, well, you'll have the mic, so go ahead, Alan. Rachel, do you yield to Alan because he's got the mic?
All right. Just on that notion of the multiple redemptions, that's what we do with the Passover Seder. We're experiencing that right now we are being redeemed. It's not something that happens in the past. It's something that we're doing right now.
Right, because we're supposed to feel as if we were enslaved and therefore feel like we were redeemed. Can I tell a story about that, given that comment and given that I'm thinking about my mother? One of the most memorable Pesachs in my life was 1988. I was a sophomore in high school, and in the 2 weeks leading up to Pesach, my parents were in the Soviet Union during one of those undercover, surreptitious visits to refuseniks. You know, false bottom suitcases, anglicizing all the names of the people they were visiting. So if the KGB asked them and they were visiting Grisha Mushavsky, it looked like Gary Meyerson in their book, and they were anglicizing all the addresses. They were being followed by the KGB all the time. Obviously, we had no contact with them. My sister and I were home. They landed at JFK Erev Pesach at like 10 in the morning, maybe even after that, because I think they went straight from the airport to where we were being hosted for Seder night. I could picture the dinner table, and at our friends, the Greenbergs, my orthodontist, and I remember my parents saying, "Now I get it." Right? They felt that they had been redeemed by leaving the Soviet Union and coming to Seder night, and it's the first time they could ever believe it when they read the words in the Haggadah that every generation has to imagine themselves as if they were enslaved in Egypt and to feel redemption, and they felt it. It was very powerful for them. They stayed, I mentioned this in the eulogy, they stayed in touch with a lot of those refuseniks, and my mother made a commitment that whenever possible, when she found out that any of them got their papers, she flew to Israel and met them at Ben Gurion when they arrived, so that she was one of the first faces that they would see. Yeah. Wow. And since I'm telling stories and it's cathartic for me, so I hope it's interesting for you. In the early 90s, my sister had two friends from college who were on a similar trip to visit refuseniks. Things have begun to open up a little bit. This is like post Glasnost and Perestroika, or while it's all happening. And they're in some random apartment in Moscow, or maybe it was Leningrad, I don't remember. And they're meeting with a young family, and they notice that the guy in the family is wearing a watch that would have been very hard to procure in Russia in the early 90s. And they don't speak any Russian, and the family spoke very little English, but they were curious. So they try to say, well, where'd you get that watch? Where's that watch from? And the Russian guy points to the watch and says, Kligfeld. Because 4 years earlier, my parents had been in that same apartment. It was the last family they visited before coming on that day when they flew back to the States. And my father decided to take off his watch and give it to that guy.
Wow.
Okay. With that in mind, top that. Rachel and then Tova.
I'm not going to try. I scrolled back to verses 8 and 12, where it's Balayla Hazeh, and verse 42, it's Hu Halayla Hazeh. So I just wanted to ask, what's the significance?
Don't know. I'm still thinking about just the Halayla Hazenis of this, but I don't know how to distinguish between if there's a significance to Ba and Ha. Don't know. The who here, I feel like Dr. Seuss. The who here is the thing that's triggering Rashi's need to say it refers to a particular night that had been predicted, like this one, right? Tova, but did you want to say something, Matt?
Reaction out. This has been in the back of my mind since it started. Is the we're trying really hard to force these little pieces of the language into an English framework, and I think we need to remember that for the reader, the native reader or whoever this was meant for, you just go with it. You know,
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, it's like a Schrodinger's language thing. You know,
Yeah.
It means once you observe it and put it into English, okay, that's what that means. But if you observe it a second time, it means something else. But in its natural state, it's both or all of the possible meanings.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what you're saying in a few short sentences, that is the wonder and the challenge of living in a tradition that reveres pshat, or the attempt at pshat, and then also reveres the very midrashic process that Arthur Stern of blessed memory sometimes was frustrated by. But that is Schrodinger's, right? They both exist simultaneously. The plain meaning, which we actually can't even access. We don't know if it was accessible even in Hebrew, but we certainly can access it across centuries and language barriers. But that is real. That has import. That has divinity, if you will, as does everything we pull out of it simultaneously. But I think you're right to point us to the fact that were we reading this in our vernacular 2,600 years ago, it might have just been simple. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Tova and then Marshall. It really changes the dynamics to only have one operative microphone. Because so far, every person who's wanted to speak next has been at the antipod of the other person. Go twiddle the knob. No. Leave it.
Just going back to the tracing back of Halayla Hazeh to the covenant between the parts and Abraham passing between the parts, that just suddenly evoked for me that we are on the verge of he passed between the parts in anticipation of slavery in Egypt. We're about to pass between the parts of the sea as we leave Egypt.
Really good. Thank you, Tova. So many layers. Marshall? Sorry, Barry. Alan, wake up.
Yeah, following up on what Matt was talking about, I recall after Robert Alter did his translation of the Torah, he also wrote a book called, I believe it was called The Art of Biblical Translation, in which he explains his whole approach towards translating. It's a wonderful read if you ever want to pick up something like that.
Arch Biblical Translation.
I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
But by Robert Alter.
Thank you, Marshall. Antipod.
So I also want to follow up on what Matt said. As an English teacher, trying to teach prepositions to non-native speakers is hard, because you start to think about what is the actual meaning. Even as an English speaker, saying an English preposition, they don't really have meaning. They're these connecting words, and so right, exactly. And in Hebrew, some of them they just link because that's how the grammar works. But even trying to explain to non-native speakers that this word just works here, but why? Even I don't know.
Yeah, correct. It's sometimes as hard, if not harder, to explain it in your own language. Like it's easier for me to speak about prepositions in Hebrew on some level than English, because I've studied Hebrew prepositions, right? English, I just use them, right? And you're right that certain Hebrew verbs just take a preposition just because they do, and it's hard to translate. Like the verb to help in Hebrew takes a lamed, ta'azorli. Help. We have to translate it as help me. You can't say help to me. But it just takes it, and the verb to use, lehishtamesh, takes a b. It just does. Why it does, only Hashem knows. Okay, back to Matt, because we've got one more Rashi on this verse. Shimurim. Yeah, but wait for the mic.
Leil Shimurim Shaya.
No.
No, wrong Leil Shimurim.
Yeah, you went backwards. Go forward. Mishumar.
Mishumar?
The first word of the comment should be Mishumar. No, you don't have that?
I have the first one is Leil Shimurim, and then Hu Alayla Hazeh.
And then Shimurim L'chol. Yeah.
Shimurim. Okay. Shimurim L'chol B'nei Yisrael L'dorotam.
So he's quoting, or the editor is suggesting that Rashi is quoting and commenting on the second Shimurim in the verse. Yeah.
Okay. Mishumar Uva Min Hamizikin. So that I think that means it is guarded or protected, and this comes from what is it protected against? It's protected against the mizikin, the demons or evil, bad things.
Good. Pause a second. The mishumar uva is its own idiom, so you don't translate the uva as where is it coming from. It means something like is preserved and will continue to be preserved. Mishumar uva, it's like as if to say it's an ongoing preserving. Okay. Who's being preserved and protected in this rendering?
I think it's being preserved against something, against mizikin. Mizikin are demons.
Demons, right? Or negative influence. But who's the one being protected here?
Oh, the people of Israel, I would imagine.
So he agrees with Everett Fox and Alter that the Shimurim here is still being offered, the preservation is still being offered to the Israelites by God, and that somehow by continuing to do Pesach, we will continue to be protected from the Mizikim. Note that Rashi is very precise, that I don't know if he used the word Piel in his brain, but he knows that Shimurim is the noun form of Lishamer, so when he turns it into kind of an adjective, Mishumar, he holds that form rather than saying Shamur. Right? So it's Mishumar. Go ahead, Kinyan.
Kinyan she'ne'emar velo yiten hamashchit v'gomer from Sachim. So Kinyan she'ne'emar in relation to the matter in which it is said, quote, and not to give the angel of death. Is that the mashchit?
Correct.
And so on.
Right. So the lo yitain hamashchit is from earlier when the 10th plague is being described, and the mashchit, the destroyer, which is one of the languages for the thing that brings the 10th plague, will not have access to the Israelites because they will be protected. They'll be protected because of the blood on the lintel and because of God. And so what Rashi's saying is that very notion of the Israelites doing the proper rituals on the night of Exodus, protecting them from bad influences, so too in Pesachs to come, if you do the right rituals, if you have the 4 cups of wine and you say everything properly, your home will be as protected that night as the Israelites were protected back then, right? So it's also a beautiful image, but very different than the one that Larry was spinning out before of our doing the protecting of God that night. No, it's God continuing to protect our homes. That's also lovely to imagine our Seder nights as living under the biodome of God's protection as our ancestors were the night of Exodus. Okay, I see 2 hands, Marshall and then Norm. And I see you, Rick.
Yeah, in the Silberman translation, there's something is put in here where he says this night is protected, and he adds, and it's not in the text itself, as come and comes from such from ages past.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I guess God protected us in the past, and therefore will protect us now also.
He's trying to make sense of the uva there. I thought that Mishumar uva is its own phrase, that it's an ongoing thing, but maybe he's trying to make sense of the exact word. Yeah. Norm?
I think Rashi's interpretation might be right, but either the Torah or Rashi got the effect wrong, because historically, Seder night was often one of the most dangerous nights.
Right.
And I recall that when Rachel and her mother were in Goethe, they were walking down the street, and her mother suddenly realized she had been in this place before on this block because she had been celebrating a holiday in a basement.
Wow.
And since we knew what season, since Rachel knew what season in the springtime she had been in Goethe with her own mother, well, staying at her grandmother's, but with her mother, she figured that it had to be Passover and that she had attended a Seder in a basement under very covert circumstances, because Passover was a particularly dangerous time then. But we also know that in Eastern Europe, it was often a very dangerous time.
Yeah, that's a helpful comment. Thank you, Norm. Rick and then Larry.
Hi. So I looked at the Unclus, and he helps obviously with the translation. The first time it's natir, the second time it's natirin. So you could easily think that God was doing the watching. It's a singular verb, and then the second time it's plural. So that's for the Israelites to do. No?
Let me look.
Natir in verse 42. You already did the Natura Carta, I think, last time, but we didn't do it's singular and plural.
Yeah, that's interesting. Onkelos, it's the same Hebrew word both times. Shimurim. The first time it's singular and uncle in Aramaic, natir, and then natirim plural. Yeah, interesting. Okay, Larry, and then we'll go on to the next verse.
This is a question from Marshall. I'm only asking because I think some of you all may be interested. Marshall, not only does he have The Art of Biblical Translation, there are two other books, The Art of Biblical Narrative and The Art of Biblical Poetry. Are those contained in one, or there's three separate books? So the one for biblical narrative obviously describes the stories. He has a separate book I saw on David and Jonathan as well. So so they're all available in libraries. So I've just actually put a hold on one, and I've actually borrowed one already. So if you guys want to go look on your Libby to borrow them, and not, but they're also all available on Kindle.
What a world. Okay, let's go to the next pasuk. We're on verse 43. Joel, do you want to read?
Vayamar Adonai el Moshe ve'Aaron. God said to Moshe and Aaron, Zot chukat ha-Pasach, kol ben nechar lo yochal bo. This is the law of the Paschal Lamb. Every nechar is adult.
Nechar is from the root that means stranger or foreigner, a nochri, right? Gary Tiberetz nochriya, I was a stranger in a strange land. But we're going to be challenged to actually figure out exactly who the subject of Lo Yochal Bo is. But literally, every son of, and son of can sometimes mean a member of a group, of a nechar, of someone who's a foreigner, Lo Yochal Bo.
Will not eat it, yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with you, Joel. What do you think we're learning a law here, right? We've moved from kind of the night of Exodus to kind of the scope of Pesachs in the future to halacha, as it were. I know it's an anachronistic term with the Torah, but Allah, what's the law you think, Joel, we are being taught?
Not to eat the Paschal Lamb. What I don't know what
Who
is.
Who can't eat the Paschal Lamb?
Oh, what the nechar is.
Yeah, who is the ben nechar whom we're being told is prohibited from eating it, and the it is the Pesach. What do you think?
Right. A non-Jew.
Okay, could be a non-Jew, right? Could be saying, and by the way, some people not only believe that's what the verse means, some people paskin that way. There are lots of Jewish communities who will not permit a non-Jew at a Seder. I was brought up the opposite. It's a beautiful thing to expose this ritual to non-Jews, but some people believe that is halacha mifureshet, explicit halacha, that you cannot have a non-Jew with you at the Seder, because the Seder is the analog to consuming the Paschal offering. The kol ben nechar lo yochal bo. I see bunches of hands, so let's start where the microphone is. Larry?
I want to take us back, and before we talk about what it means,
closer.
I'm sorry, before we talk about what it means, what's going on here? All of a sudden, we've gone from narrative, okay, the art of biblical narrative, to suddenly now God, Hashem, is speaking to Moshe and to Aaron where are we? When are we? When is this taking place, and why is this suddenly interjected in the story here? So
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to any of those questions, but you jumped immediately into, well, what does this mean? Whereas I'm thinking, whoa, scene change, costume change, everything's changed, and you're just going along like it's continuing.
So first of all, yes. If you, as Tova just pointed out, if you looked at the scroll of the Torah, there's a full break in this part. That means that it's not a new chapter. So the Christian divisions consider this to be part of the same material, but the Torah scroll makes it a new idea. And spoiler alert, the matter to which Rashi addresses himself in this verse is exactly that. When is this happening? Okay. But let's start with just figuring out what the content of the verse might mean. Diane? Oh, no. Stevie? We'll go around, go counterclockwise.
Well, first, to Larry's point, I will repeat what I said a month ago or something, that I would like it, so to speak, if the paragraph break was one verse earlier, and that, as Diane was saying, that verse that we just read seems like a stitching together of different things, as though it's trying to connect what came before to this, chapter that's legalistic about, so it seems like an introduction to what we are doing for generations to come. But what I planned to say was that, however, in the effort to unpack what nechar means, we have to consider that in verse 48, looking a little bit ahead, we have a different rule for the ger. And ger is also a word that I'm sure we will spend a long time trying to unpack what it might mean in a biblical context. But the fact that the ger can be circumcised and then participate, and the nechar is simply not allowed to participate at all, is, like the most basic fact on the ground that we have to reconcile to figure it out.
Yes, and you can add to that wonderful complexifying of the question the rule in verse 44 and the rule of verse 45, right? And yes. What is a toshav, a dweller, and what is, and how do we possibly graph the biblical divisions of people who are not us onto our understanding of Jew and convert and stranger? They're not going to match up, right? And even though we use the word ger in rabbinic halachic Hebrew to refer to someone who's converted to Judaism, that ain't what it meant back then, right?
And we also usually think when Abraham says ger toshav, that toshav is the more close thing and
Correct.
More distant thing, whereas here it seems the reverse, that toshav is the, person who's like just happens to be here but isn't really part of us, and ger is some more integrated person.
Right, good. Let's keep going around. Norm, was it, or Rachel?
In the early 1980s, we had a friend, Paula Reimers, who was studying for conversion, and we invited her to come to Seder. And she initially turned us down on the grounds that she couldn't go to the Seder because she was not yet Jewish.
Wow.
We assured her that we would not be serving Paschal lamb, or any lamb for that matter. And so she agreed to come. And as it turns out, she went on to become a rabbi, and I believe still has a congregation in Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's a wonderful story. That's mine. Barry.
The watch.
Kligfeld. Barry and then Rick.
So I'm looking for a consistency going from 41 to 43. The Ben Nechar. In 41, it's
hard to hear.
In 41 is Yatsu Kol Tzvaot, Adonai's multitudes. Who's that? In 42, it's L'chol B'nai Yisrael. And who's that? And now we have those who are not that are Ben Nechar. So who is in 41 and 42? Those are the Israelites who accepted God's bringing us out not all Israelites left. Those Israelites that did leave got the message, and they're part of this.
Yeah.
Those that chose not to be part of that, they are nechar.
Right. So it's a maybe. Does nechar mean one who is not of us, or what does it even mean to not be of us? Is it genetic? Is it blood? Or is it acceptance of our traditions? Right. I see Rick, and then we'll go to Tova and Diane, and I want to make sure that all those comments give complete in time for us to look at Onkelos and at least to begin the Rashi. Go ahead, Tova.
Now it's just occurring to me that this is happening at a moment when we're on the verge of going out or beginning to go out, but we're not going out just as a Jewish people, we're going out as a mixed multitude. And if in some way that reflects the complexity of that experience.
Did we already hit Erev Rav? Yeah. So we've already been told we've got Erev Rav, the riffraff.
Right. So we've already gone out. Excuse me. We've already gone out. We've already had the Passover meal, right?
Maybe, because remember what your husband said. When is this happening?
Right, but if,
Rashi is gonna play with time here, but maybe.
I mean, if you go back to lots of the previous verses,
Correct.
It would appear that we're in the middle of the narrative and we've already left.
Correct.
And I think it's what Stevie said, which is this feels like it should go before all of those other things.
Look at verse 50, Diane. Just to jump the gun a bit. Vayasu kol bnei Yisrael kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe v'yetaron kinasu. And all the people of Israel did exactly what Moses and Aaron commanded them to do. That can't possibly mean that they did it in future years.
Right.
It has to mean that they did it then, and the thing that they did seems to be all the laws of Pesach,
Right.
which means to say that we're now going back to the previous night, something like that. So there is a stitching going on that is very hard to synthesize through Midrash. Rick, your hand was up.
Okay, yes. So I found a trope thing, and again, repetition is good educationally. So the end of these three verses, and now I see also in 48, because you had us look at 50, the lo yo chalbo, the mercha under the yo. I like to emphasize, he or the person shouldn't eat it. Doesn't mean that they can't be at the Seder. They just can't eat that particular thing. So they could eat other things. I just wanted to point that out. But the yo chabo, I really like.
Throw some karpas at them.
Yeah.
Here, take some parsley.
Yeah, but I just like the linking. It's like it's an underlining of the whole concept of this piece, that it's rare in the Torah that the the 4 sentences all end the same way with the same trope. So it really links them together.
Yeah,
that's it.
Thank you, Rick. Let's look at the Onkelos, because it's really interesting and it helps us understand perhaps some of what Rashi is going to say. Because I think Onkelos is translating this against Pshat, or we're wrong and he's right. Okay, that's always a possibility. So this is verse 43. V'amar Adonai leMoshe liAharon, simple, God, and God said to Moses, Aaron, da gzirat pischa, this is the law of Pesach, right? That makes sense so far. Kol bar Yisrael, any Israelite. He throws the word Israelite into the verse. Diyishtamad. Anyone know what diyishtamad means? What is a mishumad in Hebrew? Anyone know? An apostate, right? Any Israelite who has apostatized out, lo yechul bey, should not eat of it. Onkelos, again, thinks of himself not as a halachist. He's living pre-halacha, not even as a commentator. He thinks of himself as a translator, from what we can tell. He thinks the simplest meaning of this verse, particularly given what Stevie said about how there are verses coming up that seem more obviously to legislate regarding people who are not of us. The first thing that the Torah is telling us, according to Onkelos, is yeah, if you've left Judaism behind, you don't get to eat with us that night, right? You can't be in our chabura, right?
Evil son, I guess.
Something like this, right? And by the way, right, the more liberal of an expression of Judaism or any religion you have, the less comfortable you are with people putting in chayrim, right? Like the way we live our lives, anyone's invited to the shul. The good thing, anyone's invited to my home, right? If you're living in a more traditional, absolutist understanding of religion, you have firmer and closer boundaries. And if you're not with us, you are against us. I think I've told you the story that when I was living in Monroe and I would daven at a morning minyan in Kiryas Joel, the guy who ran the minyan, Reb Yosef, who was a lovely guy, when he was there, he would give me an aliyah to the Torah. He would not let me daven because I didn't have a beard, and you're supposed to have a beard in order to daven. But when he was gone, his gabbai, a guy named Lipa, would not count me in a minyan. My liberal, progressive self was offended. Mm-hmm. The part of me that understands what it means to be a community of faith totally got it. I am an apostate to him. I am. If he really knew what I really thought about all this, of course he wouldn't let me count. Why would he, right? And we all have our lines. I sometimes use this to complexify the situation at the Kotel, right? I am supportive of Women of the Wall. I think that the ultra-Orthodox monopoly of the Kotel is disgusting. I think they have turned it into a shul when it's supposed to be a historical site. And would I really feel comfortable with there being a portion of the Kotel that's for men and women separate, and Masorti, and Jews for Jesus, and Messianic? And would I really support the idea that the Kotel on Shabbat should have a section where Reformed Jews could bring a band because that's the way they daven? We all have places where we'd say, sorry, you're on the other side of that, right? So Onkelos might be saying, and he might be right, that the original intention of this verse is, if we are celebrating this night the redemption of our people by God that was pushing us in a particular direction towards what it meant to be a Jew, and you have pulled yourself away from that, you are not invited, and you can't perform the ritual. Right? Barry?
So this is the evil son who asked the question.
Yeah, I mean, it might, it might be yet another connection between this chapter and how the Seder evolved, right? I think I've shared this with you before, so I apologize if this is redundant. The punishment of karet, which is actually thought of as being more severe than the punishment of mita, because mita was you're being put to death by the courts, and karet was you're being cut off by God from the legacy or the eternality of the Jewish people. And for nearly every mitzvah in the Torah, for whom the transgression of it is karet, is a thou shalt not, a lo taseh, because it's easier to punish someone, it's more sensible to punish someone for having done something they ought not to have done than the shev va'al taseh, than they're having not done something they should have done, right? There are only two biblical mitzvot for whom the punishment for not getting up and doing it is karet, and they are Brit Milah and Korban Pesach, right? As if the Torah was saying, if you don't do either of those two things, you've basically cut yourself off from the line of the Jewish people. And this line, the way Onkelos is understanding it, is almost reversing it. It's not that if you don't do it, we're not going to count you. It's that since you've already shown yourself to not be worthy of counting, you can't do it. He could be right. That might be what the verse meant. We don't know. Okay, but that's his translation. All right, we have time to begin the. Any other comments on that, Larry? Let's get my mic.
It's not a comment on that. It's a question. I'm suddenly immersed in this idea of Torah separations in the text. So I didn't realize it till I looked at the introduction to Kaplan just now and the table of contents, and I was looking more carefully what I've been reading all these years and not seeing what he calls parshiot, which are the separations, which are the ptuchot and the stumot, which are separate from Obviously, the chapters we know are separate, and there's a little. I seem to think there's some inconsistencies there, and then we've got the aliyot as well. So,
which we understand to be later than the parashiot.
is there a source which goes through and explains these and goes a little bit further that you know of?
Not that I know of offhand. I'm certain someone did a master's thesis or a doctoral thesis of this somewhere.
But it seems to me.
Well, Stevie, you're talking to the mic.
I think the aliyot have to be quite late because there are different customs between different groups of Jews today. Ashkenazim, Sephardim, Hasidim. There's very minimal differences, but the fact that there exist any differences means that it can't be, super early.
Yeah.
But should we be aware? I mean, my question is, when we're reading, I haven't been factoring that in. Every once in a while, you'll say, okay, we're reaching the end of an aliyah and all that, and we're aware mainly of the parashiot, obviously, the parashiot. But should that be something we should be paying attention to?
Why not? I think, as Stevie says, it's a later and more conscious editorial decision, I think, where the aliyot begin and end, right? Whereas no one says in traditional practice that the division of aliyot is halacha Moshe Messinai, right? That God gave those divisions there. But you do say in From Speak that the parashiot, the openings and the closings, that's halacha Moshe Messinai, which means it's really, 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 really old, right? This aliyah does not end until this aliyah ending agrees with the non-Jews because it ends at the end of chapter 12. It's a very long aliyah lane. It's also almost coextensive with the reading for Maftir Shabbat HaChodesh, but it's not exactly coextensive. So Shabbat HaChodesh, you think it's exactly coextensive?
Well, the Torah readings that we do lead for Pesach, beginning with Ma'aftir on Shabbat HaChodesh, and then the first day of Pesach, and then the first day of Chol HaMoed, and then the seventh day of Pesach, all, pick up where the last one left off.
Right, but Shabbat,
what we're about to get to is the break between the first day of Pesach and the first day of Chol HaMoed.
Right, but the Torah reading for the Maftir Shabbat HaChodesh is essentially
the first 20 psukim
of chapter 12, whereas the Aliyah in Parshat Bo is considerably longer than that. Yeah. Okay, let's start the Rashi. Who was reading? I think Joel was reading, right?
Yes. Zot chukat Pesach.
Pasach.
Pasach.
It's a net nachta.
Yeah. B'Yud Daled b'Nisan Amra lahem Parsha zo.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
This was told to them on the 14th of Nisan, which answers our question.
Right. By the way, I just saw Joel's comment in the chat. Would you like me to read that out loud to everybody in the Whiteman conference room, or would you like me not to?
It's up to you. I was waiting for you to say it. That's why I didn't say it out loud. I was assuming that was obvious.
Okay. Caveat: I'm reading Joel Elkin's words. If you don't cut yours off, we will cut you off. You got appreciative, nervous laughter in the room, Joel, if you haven't heard it. Okay.
Go on.
Okay. Rashi is here linking to channeling Diane centuries later. He's basically saying, this can't make sense as a sentence in the chronology that we've been presented with, which is Yatsu, they already left. So he simply answers it by saying, yeah, don't worry about it. You're right. Yeah, this was said earlier, right? This was said on the 14th of Nisan, getting ready for the Exodus night. And then one of the super commentaries on Rashi says that this is proven by verse 50 that we looked ahead to, that all of this seems to be going back in time to discuss, as if to say that when Aaron and Moshe gave the Israelites the rules for Pesach night, they were also giving them rules for future Pesach night, and it included these inclusions and exclusions for who is eligible. Okay, that's the only thing Rashi says. Oh, no, he does Kol Ben Echar. Let's read it. Let's give us 3 minutes because we've been toiling in that material. Joel.
Kol Ben Echar שהתנכרו מעשיו לאביו שבשמיים.
Okay, so he takes the Ben Nechar. He doesn't add in the word Yisrael as Onkelos does, but he seems to be either agreeing with or informed by Onkelos that we're talking about us. And he turns the Ben Nechar into a hit pa'el verb. Shenit nachru, lehit naker, to make yourself into a foreigner. You aren't a foreigner, but you can make yourself into a foreigner. Go ahead. Shenit nakru masav.
Well, a hit pa'el usually doesn't take a direct object, so it's sort of weird.
Yeah, or maybe ma'asav is the subject, that his actions foreignize themselves.
Oh, I see.
Regarding Aviv Shebashamayim.
That makes sense. So his actions removed him from his father and the father in heaven.
Right, and there's a line, an editorial line in one of the commentaries that says "Shemit naheg k'nochri." If you're acting like a nochri, you're a nochri. Vizar, and a stranger, lahakadosh baruch hu. Okay, go ahead.
V'achar hanochri. Was that echad or achar?
Echad.
Oh, echad hanochri.
You have the word nochri there? Some of us have the word goy. This may be a question of pure editorial differences or censors not liking the word goy. Do you have goy, Larry?
Goy here,
yeah. Echad goy v'echad Yisrael. Nochri makes sense because that's the verb being used, but go ahead.
V'echad Yisrael mishumad.
You have mishumad. I have mumar. Okay.
Mishumad b'mishma.
Right.
So both the Nochri, the Goy, and the Israelite who has apostated himself are mentioned.
Yeah, or are implied here, right? What's interesting about this is that I think many of you know that there's a phrase, Yisrael afal pi shechata Yisraelhu. You can't sin yourself out of being part of the Jewish people, right? We don't accept conversions out of Judaism, for the most part. One way of understanding, if someone says to me, it says, I was born Jewish to my Jewish mother, and I converted to Buddhism, and I converted to Christianity, I would say, do you like an aliyah? because we believe that the inclusion is so powerful. But there are other forces in our tradition that says, yeah, you can mishumad yourself out of being accepted. And if the version of the Rashi that's correct is mishumad as opposed to mumar, those are synonyms, right? Mumar is from the verb lahamir, to change. So mumar is one who changed themselves, right? Mishumad is one who destroyed themselves, right? But then that would make sense to have it be even more connected to Onkelos' language, because Onkelos was mishtamed, yishtamed. Stevie, was your hand up? Last comment, Stevie, because we're over time.
Well, I was just going to say that the parallel in the Mechilta has a biblical source text. If you want to check Ezekiel 44:9.
Let's look.
Yeah, found it interesting.
Ezekiel 44:9. Let me put it up. This will end.
Yeah, you see that?
Yeah.
You know what?
The Mechilta, which is the midrash that Rashi is quoting from. Okay. All right, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Ko Amar Adonai Elohim Kol Ben Nechar Erel Lev. That is fascinating. Any stranger who's doesn't have an uncircumcised member, but uncircumcised heart, the Erel Basar, or uncircumcised in the flesh, Lo Yavo El Mikdashi, cannot come to my sanctuary, L'chol Ben Nechar, to any stranger, Asher Betoch B'nei Yisrael, that is inside the Jewish people. So Ezekiel is very frum, right? And Ezekiel says that whether you did not convert or you converted out in your heart, we don't want you in shul. We'll end there. We'll start with verse 44 next week. Happy New Year, Sylvester Sameach. See you soon.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org. www.ccc.org.